And on that note, Diane, let's bring you back in. What's been happening in the US with regard to elections and democracy?
Definitely, I have to say that the same powers that seem to be working with Tommy Robinson, whether you're for or against him or believe in him or not, is the same sort of influence that we need to be aware of in the States with the presidential election. And I think one thing that I want to say that overarches all of this is that we need to be aware of that. We need to make sure that they are not winning. And by letting them win, that means that they are dividing us, meaning those of us who can think for ourselves. And we all need to be aware of that they're not doing that. So I just want to say quickly a little bit about the Trump assassination. I haven't been on the news since this happened. It's been a crazy few weeks, obviously, in American politics. But first, I would just like to say, regardless of whatever you think of the Trump shooting, last week there was a hearing with the Secret Service director. And we can see that there was, again, a cross-party committee that looked into what she was doing or not doing at the Trump assassination attempt event. And they called on her to resign. And they said, basically, you couldn't do anything. You couldn't answer any questions. You didn't answer anything that we asked you. And so we are calling you to resign. And then we see the resignation letter on the next slide, which just basically says, well, I'm sorry I failed you. Okay, I give up. That's it. I'm done. So what we see from here is, that's the Republican side of things. But the other problem from here is, okay, so she's resigned. But what's going on the Democratic side, I think, is very problematic and it's very complicated. So I thought I would explain this a little bit, especially for a British audience that might not understand the details of how presidential elections work. So if anyone followed the 2020 campaign, Kamala Harris was a mess, as it says on this next slide here. And the problem with her was that she had almost no votes in the primary election. She dropped out in 2019. She had no support. She had no money. She ended her campaign. And for those of us who are watching the election closely, when she was chosen to be the VP, nobody had ever heard of her. Like, who is this woman? We forgot about her because there were a lot of other potential VP candidates that made it further into the election that maybe would have been more successful or maybe actually made more sense. So when we talk about the convention, what does this mean? Well, we had the Republican National Convention a couple of weeks ago. That happened sort of to plan, other than the Trump bandage that everyone talks about. But anyway, this is from a US government source explaining what's supposed to happen at a national political convention. And this is on either side. And this is really important to understanding what is supposed to happen compared to what is happening. The national political conventions, basically, they send delegates from every state, territory, area of the United States, and they are supposed to act on behalf of the people who voted in the primary election for either the Democrats or the Republicans. The Democrat convention is scheduled to happen in a couple of weeks. What happens with the delegates is that they are meant to, as it says there, confirm their choice of candidates. And basically, we have pledged delegates. And so the pledged delegates, we have almost 4,000 delegates in this election. Almost all of them were pledged to Joe Biden because he was the incumbent and he ran again at the time, and he was chosen. So, but if we look here, okay, so we've got 3,904 pledged delegates, and just a few that were uncommitted, and the others that weren't even close to him that tried in the democratic process, which is typical for an incumbent president, obviously, unless something really strange is going on. But it looked like that was what was supposed to be happening. But then what happened next got really, really interesting. So when Biden had the bad debate, if you all remember that, he couldn't speak, he didn't know what he was talking about. And for a long time, people have been saying, maybe Biden isn't well. I don't blame him for this personally because my father passed away of dementia. And so I don't want to criticize anyone for having cognitive issues. But the 25th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution is something that is meant to be put into place in the case that the president or the vice president cannot continue to finish their term, which basically says that what happens if the president steps down or resigns or is too unwell to continue or dies, and this happened sort of in the wake of the JFK assassination, then the vice president becomes president, the Speaker of the House becomes vice president, and there's sort of a succession plan in place. So if that were to happen now, and Joe said, okay, I'm done, then Kamala becomes president, Speaker of the House becomes vice president, and then we'll deal with the election when we get there. The problem here, where it gets really tricky, is that Biden has decided to not step down and just finish out his term. So what happens in this case? Well, the problem with the fact that he's waited so long to withdraw from the race has caused issues. In certain states in particular, the laws up to this point for the Democratic race has said, for example, well, you can't withdraw this close to the race unless they die, or because his name is already on the ballot. There's been a time limit, especially in certain states, for the states to choose their delegates to go to the National Convention and vote for the chosen candidate. So the Heritage Foundation, which is a think tank on the conservative side of things in the states, has been looking into this and saying, well, there are problems. And this was on the 1st of July. So this was before he withdrew. So then what happened next? If we look at the next slide, we can see then that there was a problem, because as soon as Joe Biden dropped out on the first full day as a candidate, it was really, really weird. All of a sudden, Kamala Harris was the anointed, chosen, coronated one, without really understanding why. And this is my question, is why was it that they all just ran to Kamala Harris, considering she has no record, and the record that she does have was really disastrous, and she dropped out really early in the race. So it would have had a chance, according to the rules, to have some discussions among the Democratic Party, decide what they were going to do. But no, all of a sudden, day one, she was in there. Kamala is the woman. She is going to fix everything. She is going to save the country, whatever. So the DNC passed some rules just in very recent times. So this was just last week on the 24th. They had a meeting and literally changed the convention rules to make it so that they could nominate Kamala virtually, rather than coming to the conference in Chicago, which is meant to take place next month, and they vote to approve everything that is going to happen. So this timeline is brand new. They've never done it this way before, so they literally changed the rules to put Kamala into place. And it's really, really, to me, a bit, this has never happened before, obviously, but the fact that, to me, this does not seem like a democratic process. But if there was any question as to whether or not Kamala is actually going to be the chosen one, let's look at this next video and see what the past president had to say.
Kamala!
Hello. Hi.
Hey there!
Oh, hi, you're both together. Oh, it's good to hear you both.
I can't have this phone call without saying to my girl Kamala, I am proud of you. This is going to be historic.
We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office.
Oh my goodness. Michelle, Barack, this means so much to me. I am looking forward to doing this with the two of you, Doug and I both, and getting out there, being on the road. But most of all, I just want to tell you the words you have spoken and the friendship that you have given over all these years mean more than I can express. So thank you both. It means so much. And we're going to have some fun with this too, aren't we?
So going back to other topics in the news regarding deep state issues and who's doing what and who's pulling what strings, I think I have the same questions in America right now as we have over here in the UK, Brian and Ben.
Yeah, a troubled world, Diane, but we will continue lifting stones.